Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Banyan Tire Tracks podcast. I'm Patrick Ascolis, and with me today is Nancy O'Liddy of the NITL. And if you don't know what that stands for, that's the National Industrial Transportation League. Nancy, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for Banyan having me. This is kind of a fun opportunity. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's very fun to have you too. We were just talking about it, and we're just going to stick with my shiny head instead of her having the glasses on and having shiny there too. So that way you're only blinded by one thing.
One shiny.
Yeah. And we already talked about it. Nancy's not just going to turn the camera off and say her camera's not working. So we're delighted to have her in her full view here. So thanks again, Nancy.
Thank you.
Hey, so before we get into the NITL and what that's all about, I always like to start with, who are you? Why am I talking to you? And how'd you find yourself in the logistics space?
So let's start. I'll try not to go way back because then they'll know how old I am. But
it's only 33 years back. Not a day more.
It's all good. It's all good. But I graduated from high school on a Friday. It was Memorial Day weekend, and went to work on Capitol Hill on that Tuesday.
Okay.
And I worked for a congressman from California, fabulous man. And then I went to work for Leo Ryan from California, who, as you may recall, was part of that Kool-Aid massacre.
Oh,
yes. So that was my boss at a very young age. A little startling to go through. I eventually left the Hill because it just was time. I had the experience and it was time to go. So then I went to the association world. For a bit, I was in the aging field, handling aging issues.
And what does that mean, aging? Just me getting older, or what is that?
Well, maybe no.
Are you trying to speed that up? No.
So I represented assisted living and nursing homes.
Okay.
Specifically Jewish nursing homes, and it was kind of just a fabulous opportunity to learn about how our country doesn't do a real good job on that. But so dear to my heart, that will be when I retire.
Yeah. Hopefully it's improved by the time you're in it, right?
Right. And then I went to work for transportation. I went to work for the Truckload Carriers Association and was there for about 8 years. Then I went to work with the Transportation Intermediaries Association, which is actually how I met Banyan and Lance. And then now I am the executive director of NITL. So I've done the full circle. I've done now I'm rail and ocean, which I have to tell you is much more complicated than highway. It makes highway look like a breeze.
I was going to say it's only east, west, north, south, and then you got borders for the highway. If you go ocean and what was it? Railroad?
Rail is very difficult, and rail is difficult.
Not to jump in subjects, but are you involved with any of the railroad failings that have happened in the recent history here? Especially, I'm in Cleveland, so just in Ohio here.
Awful, absolutely awful. We don't represent railroads.
Okay.
They have their own association. Of course, my members, because NITL has been around since 1907. I'll just jump in there.
Yeah.
And NITL represents industrial shippers. It's probably one of the first associations ever established, to be honest. And during its history, there was a time when all the railroads were members of NITL, even though it was the voice of the shipper.
Gotcha.
We do have some short lines that are still members, and some larger ones like KC and PT were before they merged.
Right.
At that time, NITL we don't promote any more mergers.
Okay.
There's just not enough competition as it is, especially in rail. And rail's had its time, COVID. I
was going to say, isn't that why we put antitrust in the first place? Was a bit of that back in the day? Yeah.
Hello. And we could get into that about ocean as well.
Okay.
We'll talk about that too. But NITL's members it's much more diverse. So it's hard to say that we're just industrial any longer, because we have members like Armada, Cargill, Nestle, Purina, which are definitely not industrial.
Yeah.
However, we do represent members like Shell, BP, Exxon. So our members are all over the place. We have logistics folks. We have the ports. A lot of the ports are members of ours. They support the organization. And then we have outside associations themselves that work with NITL and support us because of all the regulatory work we do. So like Grain and Feed is a member, Fertilizer Institute's a member. There's a whole handful of them because we are so involved and we handle rail, ocean, and highway. So legislatively, we are very heavy in
Yeah.
legislation.
I was just say, it sounds like you got a lot of big names and kind of a diverse demographic within those big names that you touched there. What is Knit League's mission? Why are all these people coming to you? What is your goal, and why are they counting on you or working with you to get there?
So I started with Knit League in September of 21. Truly, their whole mission is to be the voice of the shipper.
Okay.
And I don't think we have to be distinct about which kind of shipper, because I also have small shippers. I have small chemical makers and movers and importers. We have Solvay. It's such a combination of members. It's very broad.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
so,
shipper is such a broad statement. And when you say that you're, that's kind of the voice for them, does that put you at odds with the 3PLs, or is it more of just access to shipping and everything that comes with it?
I would say no, it does not put us at odds with the shippers. I mean, with the 3PLs, because their issues are very different. Unless they're actually brokering import-export freight.
Got you.
There's not really, I don't feel there is any problem there. It hasn't happened for me for the last 2 years anyway.
There you go.
And our issues, and as I said, we work a lot with the Surface Transportation Board, and that's all rail. And they finally have a full house, so we can actually get things done. And have great respect for Marty Oberman, the chair. Hope he stays on. And then we also work with the Federal Maritime Commission. Same thing as well on any of the ocean issues. And because Knit League was very instrumental technically and otherwise getting OSRA 22 passed, I've never in my career got anything passed that fast. So that was outstanding. Now what we have to do is make sure it's implemented properly.
And what for the layperson, what is OSRA 22?
The Ocean Shipping Reform Act, which had not been updated for it's like over 20 years. It had not been updated. And that goes back to that situation you were talking about before with antitrust. The same problem in ocean we have in rail, because we only have like 5 big carriers that are carrying all of the freight. However, they do have antitrust immunity, and none of them are American ships any longer. They're all foreign.
Okay.
So we do question that at different times if they still need antitrust, but we have to work with them because obviously we need the freight to move. And now we have this dilemma coming with Christmas that, the Mississippi Poor River just won't fill. It's not deep enough, so the ships can't come through. Ooh. So that has caused, people are very afraid that we're going to have empty shelves at Christmas because we can't get the ships to move through. Yeah.
Wow. And you were talking about that, let me see, make sure, OSRA
22.
OSRA 22 went through so quickly. Is that because some of the problems or the issues were highlighted by the COVID pandemic and the logistics problems that were from there and the packed ports?
100%. 100%. Without, honestly, because I've worked on the Hill and on the outside, and it is not that easy to get legislation passed.
I don't think anybody that's covered the government side says, "Yeah, don't worry, this is fast and it'll get done right away." Yeah,
we got this, and we highly respect Congressman Garamendi and Dusty Johnson because their work making that a bipartisan bill is fantastic. And it was a crisis. We all lived it. It was a crisis. The shelves were empty. Things were getting there. Like Christmas stuff was showing up at Easter, so then they couldn't even sell it. It caused a really bad economic situation for us. Yeah.
And supply chain and logistics is bipartisan kind of by nature.
It is. It used to be. I think, and Biden did get the transportation bill through, which was, I think, instrumental in keeping us alive in the economy. But most of our shippers feel, through the study we did with Bloomberg, Lee Klasko, which is, I don't know if you've met him, but he's fantastic and he's a wonderful speaker. Very well. He's a good person. You might want to have him on your little show. Little show. Might want to have him on your little show.
I'll have my people reach out to it, and by people,
he would love it.
David and Megan, we'll have them get at it. That's right.
I'll have my people.
Yeah.
But anyway, we did it for the. We kind of got it in late, kind of on the end of the first quarter. We'll probably do one again, but for the most part, they feel that it's kind of balanced at the moment. But you know that So this is already like a couple months old. If you read, they're saying that the rates are starting to get back where they were, and things are going to get a little tougher in contract work. So the ball was only in the shipper court for a very short time.
Yeah, I have
Very short time.
And it's funny because I've even have a client or two that they're talking about going after managed transportation things, and they're like, well, in order to get it right now, we'd have to get so low that we're just going to wait, deal with what we have, so that way we don't have to stay with any of these promises we committed to and then end up losing money down the road.
Exactly. You do not want to get in a contract, and I'm speaking for the shippers, but you do not want to get in a contract that's not fair. I think we've all had a rough couple of years with that, and I understand that they're going to wait it out now. I get it.
Yeah. No, and I mean, so we've talked about a little bit of where that's going. Is that where right now the advocacy and the kind of the policy development you're looking at right now and for the future? Or because we just talked about what has passed and kind of what's going on. What are you working on currently, and what's the next step, or what's the next thing to go for?
OSRA 22 had a lot of implementation by the Federal Maritime Commission. We are still working on that. We're still waiting for things to come out from that. One is demurrage and detention and who gets billed, and that whole process. That's taken up a lot of our time.
I was just saying, how do you get to have so much fun, you know?
Oh, I know, right? Let's talk about that. And then, so that bill has kept us quite consistently busy because they're doing what they're supposed to, thank goodness.
Right.
And then we got to respond. So
I would say, but the bill passing is just step one in a much longer process.
Oh, major. I forget how many, I apologize. I don't know how many things that will come out of it. I used to. But right now we're waiting for demurrage and detention to come out.
Okay.
Yeah. Then we also, on the rail side, we've been working on this since 2016 as an association. And it's called reciprocal switching. It's EP 711 for the rails. So right now, if you wanted to switch off of a line, and move it differently, or if there's a crisis, generally it's not such a big deal. But we've been waiting forever for it. And right now you have to go to FMCSA to get permission to switch a line.
How long does that take?
You never know. Not going to happen overnight, though. And there goes that detention and demurrage. So it is quite a process. And then the other one we've been working on forever, way long before I came, is EP 704, which would give. Right now, there are very many commodities that are exempted from being able to use rail.
Right.
We don't know why we still have so many exemptions and why the rail can't move it. If we're really trying to go carbonize and clean air and
really make the most of moving that giant freight train along with all the packing up with everything you can. So who would reevaluate that list, or what is your push to have that list be reevaluated by?
That would be the Federal Maritime Commission.
Okay.
And so we spend a great deal of time on that. And so just an example of things that are exempt: paper, steel.
Oh, so it's not for like a safety reason. It's more of like hey, if we let trains move it, then we're going to miss out on being able to move it the way we always have been. Correct.
Or you have to get an exemption, which is also not easy. We've been working with ISRI on this. Their steel, it's a steel association for scrap metal, and quite a few others. I'd be happy to share the list right now. That's the two top ones on my brain.
Is that an old, like how old is that list?
Old. Yeah. Like old. And it's long. It's a lot of commodities that get hurt by it. So we've been fighting that one for a long time. These are things that people don't know in the supply chain.
I have no idea, and I've been working on the logistics side of things. What if that was to change? Do you think that would, for the shipper side, would that lighten some of those rates because there's more options, or what kind of reaction would happen to the market if all of a sudden I now have options I didn't have before for certain commodity goods?
I think it would be really helpful. We need it. The longer it takes to move it, the less of the availability. So we know we need steel, right? If we're going to build homes or anything, pretty much, even rails, rail. That one
they can't move the part that they use to make
the part that they need, which has been our biggest argument actually on Capitol Hill. And so we're working on that daily. There's always something coming up.
Are there still big opponents of that?
I don't think
or is it just you're fighting an old and like concrete process is the problem?
I think it's just an old problem that hasn't resurfaced from the basement because there's
Gotcha.
been so many other new supply chain issues
Mm-hmm.
through COVID, really, the supply chain has been so challenged
Mm-hmm.
since I've been here. I came at the right time that the things that we were working on, like those, tend not to get to the top again. So we're trying to get them back to the top.
But I mean, from my hearing, and I'm probably way oversimplifying it, this would help with a lot of the capacity issue that is out there too.
Yes.
Okay.
100%. Yes.
All right.
I mean, if everyone really does truly want to go green and help with the environment and everything, we need options. We need the options to be able to move it. I mean, everybody pushes rail, so we'd like to have everybody be competitive. Okay. Right now, it's not competitive. If you can't use it, then it's not competitive.
Right. If people aren't using it, there's probably a reason. Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And competition is a big issue. I mean, it is an ocean, and it certainly is in the rail.
And that's interesting talking about ocean and rail for that, because, like I said, very LTL and on the ground centric here at Banyan. Not to say we don't touch everything, but there's competition everywhere. Yes. from the small regional to the big names, and I kind of always assumed that played out in all the different modes. And it's surprising to hear from you that that's not the case.
Not the case. And it was interesting for me as well, because I was with truckload and I was with the brokerage. So you didn't see so much of all of the legislation, and most of it is old, that is making it an anti-competitive supply chain, which we have to change. We have to change it in ocean, we have to change it in rail, and keep highway going.
Hey.
And now we got this situation with yellow, which I think was very, very sad. And we'll see what happens.
We have to say we're all looking to see how the pieces fall, who picks them up, and where it goes from there.
And, I know, and what the rates will be.
Oh, right? Yeah.
Although we can't talk about rates, but rates will change. They're already changing.
When aren't they? When aren't they changing?
I know, right? Yeah. Oh my goodness! I think I really wish at some point that I could get articulate enough to do a whole thing on just how the supply chain really works, because I don't think the everyday consumer understands.
I would say you have a big enough whiteboard, because I
know. I mean, honestly, and the fees that it takes to move things is unbelievable.
It's one of those things where in my past life, I'd have to go inside places and see, and you'd realize that this product that's on the shelf isn't just one thing. A box comes from one place, a leg of it comes from another, and then somebody puts this part together and someone puts the whole thing. And then as I've been in logistics, you realize that between all of those separate steps, then there's, where'd you get the source material from? Where is it going? How is it now getting to and you're kind of in awe at how much happens for, someone just to have it showed up on my doorstep, or I bought it, I purchased it, and it's there now, and I use it, and I never gave it a second thought.
I think we will see a little slowdown again if we can't get the ships in or out of Mississippi. I don't know what we're going to do, because a lot goes through there. So
wait for it to freeze and put some ice skates on it, right? Yeah,
I don't know. But that'll take some rerouting as well. And then that takes more of the LTL, and that takes more of the, So it's not a simple process to move freight. That's for sure. No. And it's definitely not a cheap process.
And with and just real quick, while we're talking about Mississippi here, are we seeing some roadway freighters, either LTL or truckload, trying to take advantage of grabbing those lanes? Or is that what some of the maritime or the ocean have to do to get those to where they've committed them to be?
The last thing I read, I didn't get how we're getting it off there, but they're saying that we have to, because the backup is it's starting to get bad. Like we had in Long Beach and LA, when we couldn't move it because there was no one.
There was a line of trucks and nothing was moving, and
nothing was moving.
Set up camp.
It was frozen. Yeah, it was frozen. Another issue that we've been dealing with, and this is just kind of it's not one of our heavy ones, but it's interesting, and I think because we're talking so broadly.
Yeah. I like interesting.
Well, this one is, we work with the Global Shipping Forum out of London, and they're fabulous, very bright. So they're kind of our arm in that area. One of the things that we've spent some time on this year is cleanliness of containers. So when we're speaking about ports and containers just sitting there, and how long they sat there, and how many times they're moved and put somewhere else. That's a big issue right now. And even next week, they'll be meeting again to discuss. They're trying to make them voluntary, like a voluntary checklist of who should do what, who should be on first. But, that's how a lot of these strange insects got in this country. Like
I'm going to say voluntary doesn't strike me as the best way to get things to happen, especially within a business that's very, let's go. Well, it needs to be done yesterday.
And you got to make sure it's all fair, right? You have to make sure that everyone should have a part to play, not just one particular entity.
Right, exactly. You can't put all of the weight on one person, and because then they're never going to be able to do it. It won't get done the way they want it to. But we
don't want to hold up. We don't want to hold up freight any longer than it sometimes gets held up.
Yeah,
right?
Sorry guys, we're waiting. Today's a cleaning day. Everything's got to get flushed out. Call back on Friday.
But that's how the stink bug got here.
Oh,
so it was a hitchhiker on a container that was sitting out in the ocean forever. So you're like, God only knows what we could get. Hitchhiking.
What the next thing coming through is,
right. So one of the things they want to do is take away the wooden floors of the containers and make them metal. Well, that could be costly. There's just lots of things floating around, and we definitely are keeping our ear to the ground on that because it would affect a lot of folks.
And
then the United States already does have some programs in place. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with CTPAT. But that's a certification for making sure that your warehouse and your business is kept in a certain manner. And it makes you be able to, like a fast lane through the ports, if you qualify. And so, but they have those kind of standards. Like, how do you clean the thing? And so we want to be careful that we don't step on toes either. So we're helping those in London understand that we already do have some of those things in the United States.
And here's how it works. Here's what we do. Here's maybe the benefits and maybe some of the pitfalls of that system. So as you're implementing, you don't have to start from scratch. Yeah,
exactly.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And kind of talking about, with NITL working with other entities towards that. I know you had mentioned team up with Bloomberg. Can you tell me about why and what you got out of that?
Sure. Bloomberg is, I'm sure they're outstanding. They do great research. And I've worked with Lee through all the jobs that I've had, except for Capitol Hill. And what he was studying this time, we will be doing another one, but this time it was more on, like, one of the questions was, I think everyone is still concerned, is there the freight recession or is there not? Our shippers, 40% of them felt demand and rise in the next 3 to 6 months was going to happen. If you read the papers, I think because of some of the mergers and some of the, like, Yellow, and I know I read the other day that Knight and Swift, CEO and CFO, are taking a 20% cut in pay until the end of the year. So to me, that's a sign that freight is not as voluminous as we thought. I mean, that's a bad sign when it's a smart sign. I mean, they're saving themselves, but
is that because of as you were saying, a freight recession, or is that because of maybe lofty goals coming off of some of the biggest gains they had in the past 2 years?
I agree. And if a lot of people coming out of COVID started really purchasing equipment again, and maybe it's just when, like you said, maybe it was a little higher goal.
Yeah, exactly.
But that was interesting to read. I thought, wow, interesting. Right along with Yellow.
And so with that, is there a period in that we think there is a freight recession around the corner, or it's still kind of too much of a mixed bag to really put a stake in anything?
From what I've read and what his report showed from our members, so you're doing the shipping side, not the trucking side. They still feel like we're doing okay. Nobody felt, even now. Again, remember when I talk about less than truckload, this is a little bit older. It was before we had our little crisis. So those rates
are going to be a little different than the rates we're seeing today.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Because he said that they were only like 3%. Our members were saying they were only like 3% different from their good days. But I have a funny feeling that's going to change. And I just saw, and I saw that FedEx Well, you saw that UPS, their negotiations raised
Yep. They
really
did.
high rates.
They had they had that strike or the threat of it, and then they came to a negotiation and a compromise there. But now, are you saying that the rates have gone up since then?
I'm sure that they will.
No,
FedEx
it would make sense. The money's got to come from somewhere, and chances are it'll be on the side of the shipper.
Right. And so FedEx also just, I think it was this morning, put out their rate hikes. I didn't finish the notes of what they are, but they're substantial.
Okay.
They're not.
It's not small enough to just scratch off. You might want to, might have to reevaluate or at least be aware of the changes.
And I would say that every shipper, actually anyone in the supply chain, but because my shippers are my members, really should be looking at their 2024 numbers and their contracts, because if you have long-term ones, you may want to renew them, or you may not, depending on how this goes.
Depending on what you get grandfathered in. And
exactly.
I can see that. Okay.
So that's,
And this this intelligence that you got from Bloomberg, that's available on your website. Where does someone go find that?
Actually, it's on nitleague.org, NITL.org. And that's where we put all of our comments and anything you want to know about issue-wise that we filed.
Nice.
Is there on all modes.
Do you have a pretty good resource there of not just that, but other pieces of information?
Yes.
Now, would you say for your members and as their shippers is going to the website something you should do when you're going to look at contracts, or is it as you're getting, when should someone take advantage of what the Knit League is putting out there?
From what I can see and say for the last 2 years, Knit League is very, very regulatory and legislative heavy.
All right.
We don't spend as much time on educational programs or webinars, so to speak. But I do want that to change, because just like you said, we should be having a class on rate instruction. We did do a 101 on rail, which was tremendous.
I can imagine.
Oh, because again, it's so involved. It is not, I don't want to say that trucking's easy, but because it isn't. It isn't. But legislatively wise,
it probably gets a lot more attention because you've got you've got the roads, you've got the highways, you've got the different money being given out year after year. Whereas railroad, I think that's a little more sporadic. And I bet you at that one-on-one, there was a whole lot of, hey, did you even know this is why you have to do this? And why that dates back to 1910 that law got enacted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And part of the problem was, for a while, the Surface Transportation Board didn't have enough people to have votes. So you have to have 5. And that went on for a while. But now we have 5.
Okay.
And things are moving. It is absolutely, and they have definitely been in touch, both sides, working with railroad and shippers on fixing some of the problems about competition and the availability of competitive service. And we work closely. So as I said, we do have to work closely with them, because the issues are it's constant, constant. And one of our goals as the shipper's voice is to get competitive service, rail, ocean, and highway.
Right.
It just has to start being more competitive. So we don't spend as much time on highway as we do on the other 2 issues, rail and ocean, because there's others really doing a fine job on the highway. So
there's a little bit more overlap and coverage from some other regulatory and oversights and advocacy. Yeah,
and we try to work with those groups as well. And if we can support them, we do. We're on different sides. Sometimes same thing. But that doesn't happen all the time. We're on all kinds of coalitions with everybody. So
sometimes you're friends, sometimes you're enemies, sometimes, it's just, we're going to drink after. No, I get you. And that's awesome. And then as we're kind of wrapping up here, because you told me a lot and I'm happy to hear about that. What's a message to anyone listening or watching right now? Here's your chance to talk about whatever you want.
If you are a shipper and you deal daily with the rail or ocean or highway, it can be your voice. I mean, our job is to advocate, again, for competitive rail, ocean, and highway. As I said, some of the issues have been around forever, but I think that's the same in highway. I think I've dealt with hours of service since I was 10. Some of the issues just don't go away. We try to make them better. But if you are not a NIT League member, you should join if you need regulatory help or legislative help. I hope that if you want to try, that the best way to do it would be to come to the conference in Columbus. Time's running out. We're about 6 weeks away now. So we really need, if you want a room on the campus,
that's right.
that you get that. Yeah. So, because you want to be at the hotel where the conference is. So
there you go. I like that. Nancy, thank you so much for speaking to me today. For everybody, this has been Nancy O'Litty with the NIT League, the National Industrial Transportation League, where we learned that she's fighting for the rights of shippers out there. And you guys have a good fighter here. And it was great talking to you, Nancy. Thank you so much. I hope everybody enjoyed the episode and keeps following the Banyan Tire Tracks podcast. And from Patrick Escolas, we'll see you next time.
And thank you for having me.
Thanks, Nancy. I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.